It's December the 3rd, 2019. This is 508, a show about Worcester. Today's guest is Worcester legend Tina Zlody.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Tina. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good. You know, Tina, my name is Michael Benedetti, and this is Brendan Melican.
Brendan.
How's it going?
And this is the 508 show. A lot of stuff has happened, Tina, over the last couple of weeks, deaths and other things. We could wrap these up next week. I might mention briefly the one sort of trivial news thing that happened in the last couple of weeks is the Worcester minor league baseball team came out with all their marketing stuff, all their logos, all their whatevers. I think we on the show should congratulate Bill Shaner for correctly predicting that they would call the team the Worcester Paw Sox. And I want to congratulate them for their marketing, that none of their marketing involves any sort of things that make me think about creepy sex stuff in an uncomfortable way. There's nothing of that happening. Really good, really great work all around. Worcester Paw Sox.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing them play.
Congratulations.
Yeah, the baseball with the arm coming out of the chin's really something else.
And we're here right in the on the offices of, I guess, many things here high atop the Canal District.
Yes. We're
Talking to you
actually
today.
sitting in a construction zone which will eventually become right field
Yeah.
up here.
So
So.
is this building's not going to get knocked down?
No, thank goodness. And at one point Alan thought they were going to take his trees, but then he went and made sure that they weren't.
Yeah. This is like we're in the Allen Fletcher building.
We are in the Alan Fletcher building.
So there's another building though, which is coming up right cardinally that way, right? We're in Kelly Square.
Kelly Square, yeah.
So this is like one of the triangular lots in Kelly Square, which has in recent years been used as a parking lot.
Yep.
I don't know what it was before it was a parking lot.
It was an old factory.
It was an old factory, of course it was. And right adjacent to the Crompton building, and this is now has an actual like cool triangular building.
It's actually
built on
round.
it. It's like round, like
Rounded in the
oval.
front. Yeah, I'll show
oh
you
yeah.
when we'll go down
Yeah, it's
later.
like a flat iron building kind of a
Kinda cool.
kind of a building.
Yeah.
And you're part of the effort to put stuff in this building.
Yeah, so, Alan approached me about taking over, running basically building from scratch a Market Pantry store, because what the Worcester Public Market is a food hall. So there's people who are going to be selling food out of there. We have small vendors, large vendors. There's going to be a big area for public seating under the skylights, and it's anchored on one end by Wachusett Brewery and anchored on the other end by my store. So
Okay.
I jettisoned my world of 17 years at Cork University
Yeah.
to take on this new adventure in Worcester.
And is this going to be like a big open plan
Yep.
thing on the ground
Yep,
floor? Is this going to be kind of like I'm trying to think of like other things in the U.S. that people might have been to that would be like this.
I mean,
Like
there are food halls kind of all over. Like when I was visiting my friend Derek in Austin, we went to one. And
Yeah.
again, it's just aisles of like different types of food, and you can go and get a piece of pie, you can get a cup of coffee, you can go get
Yeah.
a beer, you can get a whole meal, and then when you're on your way out, you go by my store.
What's your store?
My store is the Market Pantry, so I'm going to have tea and salts and fancy coffees for you to
Okay.
take with you. So I'm going to be more grab and go, like, oh, there's a turkey pot pie, there's some beautiful cheeses. So it's going to be a very eclectic and very pretty store with a lot of different food items in it.
There's not going to be sit down.
There is sit down in the hall, but not in my store. The hall is
Okay.
going to have a huge public area where you can sit, and then in the summer, Wachusett's windows open out, and there'll be seating on the exterior. So you can sit and drink beer in Kelly Square, which I think is fascinating.
Listen, do you interrupt whenever you have a question, Brendan?
Yeah, no, I'm just
Otherwise,
thinking
I'll
about
ask the
drinking beer
first
in Kelly
question.
Square.
Right?
So here's my first question: How do you get started with planning something like this? Or I should say, so this whole project is called the Worcester Public Market.
So the whole entire project is the Worcester Public Market. My component is the Market Pantry.
Okay, so the other getting the other people in there has been outside of your purview.
Yep.
Okay, but this has been organized that there's going to be all these other vendors in there.
Yes.
And so then tell me more about then your piece of this puzzle.
So I've had to work with my friend Edith, who's at the other end of the table, and a couple of other store planners to literally like map out a plan for a retail store. I've worked with Alan Fletcher, who owns the building, and some of their builders to come up with ideas about how do we want this to look, how do we want to brand this? And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that coming from my background at Start, hi Maud.
Because you've been one of the people behind the big Start on the Street
Right.
festival, summer festival.
Which gives
in
me,
Worcester.
our fall festival, yeah, which gives me connections to area artists. So I was able to reach out to Brad Ralt of Row Woodwork, and he custom made me my table and my rolling carts and my shelving made from reclaimed and reclaimed and recycled wood. So I was able to tap into a certain market that maybe other people wouldn't be able to. I was able to reach out to a bunch of art artists and have them consign me things so that I can sell them in my store. So I'm doing my best to make everything that we bring in small batch, women owned, as local as possible, and as much Worcester components as possible.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I have a syrup and I have pancake mix, and like I said, we have bunches of coffee. We have handmade bowls and cutting boards and tea towels.
How big is this store?
Pretty big, and it can be bigger. The thing about it's a very open concept store, so I can sort of roll my carts out into the food area a little bit more. I can take over another booth if I want to that hasn't been taken up yet.
Okay.
So I can expand the store and retract it depending on the amount of people in it, because I have everything sort of mobile.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a pretty good size.
This is one of these things that I'm, like hearing you talk about this sounds very plausible, but it's also like another thing that I think just from years of living in Worcester and seeing nothing good, seeing things on this scale be talked about and never happened. I'm still always like, I still sort of don't believe all the activity in the Crompton building, for example, was actually happening.
It is, man.
It
That
could be
place
a
is packed all the
hallucination
time.
that's been happening for the last 5 years.
That place is packed all the time.
Yeah.
And the thing about, like, if you think about Crompton, how many women-run businesses are in there? Seed to Stem, Bedlam, Amy's, both of Amy's stores. There's a husband and wife team that does Birch Tree Bread. I mean, so there's, and they all support each other, which is really a nice thing. And I'm looking forward to being part of that grouping of people. And it's going to happen. I mean, if you look around my office, there's stacks of salt and oil everywhere. Like,
Is that what all
that's
this?
barbecue sauce.
There's a bunch of stuff in here right now. Our camera is actually resting on a pile of some of this stuff.
I believe that's on some barbecue sauce from Northampton. So again, like, we're the exclusive people who are going to carry Northampton olive oil. The only two places that have it are Northampton olive oil in Northampton and here. So I'm really trying to bring in some interesting kind of exclusive things, but make it still accessible and local.
Yeah. Do you have that map?
Sure.
Is it open here?
And we would be, I think,
And
Oh, we just knocked
silks are down.
we would kind of be remiss, I think, too. So I feel like
Brendan can
most
say his
people
thing.
who know you probably, at least in your current form, know you either through Start, maybe through Clark, or just as a sort of the consummate promoter of the arts. But like, what is your past life when it comes to retail? Because there are some parallels, I
Yeah,
think,
there
in terms
are.
of
There are.
curation of a space like this.
Yep. I ran the futon company on Highland Street back in the day when
Right.
it was still Highland Street.
Yeah, no,
When-
and that's what I was gonna say, like, 'cause- so as someone who
Thanks,
does
Leah.
business on Highland Street, right, that's the thing I talk to people about all the time who might not necessarily be familiar with that neighborhood, and how it tends to sort of ebb and flow, every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I think when we first met, you were still down there, and that's still what I think of Highland Street as being, from like that block from like Shaky Jake's to Romo to the Futon Company.
Alan Bilzerian.
Yeah, and I can't walk by without seeing, there's still a Doc Martens Airwear sticker from the late 80s and what's now a nail salon. But the most important thing, I think, is that it was they were all like well curated stores that had a sort of a local bent to them long before that was just marketing speak.
Absolutely.
It was something that a lot of pride was taken in on a local level, that makers, artists, and whatnot had places to actually sell their wares pre-internet.
Sure. And on a larger scale for me, I was always approached by large futon manufacturers, but I always used Nutmeg Futon out of East Hampton because
Yeah.
it was a family-run futon company, and they manufactured our futons. And I could have gotten $5 off a futon if I wanted to go with the bigger ones, but I
Right.
didn't. I wanted to make sure it was a local family-run, organization. And I did it, and Liz Hughes did it too. Like, she did it probably on a grander scale, was getting artists work in the futon company on consignment.
Right.
But you're right, back in the 90s, in early 2000s, I mean, that's when I met Duncan and Roger and
Yeah.
those cats and the.
I always use it too as a way to explain to folks who are either new to or maybe just kind of becoming aware of the city that one of our bad habits, but something that we always end up getting right on given enough time, is that we tend to be well ahead of the curve in many ways, and then we sort of forsake the things that would be incredibly awesome if only we held on to them just a little bit longer, and then we move on to something else. And I think that strip, again, and your involvement down there not being insignificant is a great example of that. We did a lot of this a long time ago. We might not have got it all right, which is why it's not here anymore. If
Right.
real estate changed, whatever. Man, like, we're really good at this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and I think that's one of the reasons that Alan tapped into me, is that he knew I could reach all of I have very many connections, but the things that I don't have that people like Edith and Leah bring to the table for me is how do you load inventory into a computer? You know, how do you manage inventory? Who do you connect with over getting coffee and white labeling it and making it yours and ordering your bags? And so there's a certain level of comfort I have with setting up a retail store, but then there's that other level where I need to learn from other people.
Yeah.
So this is my map. This is
All
like
right, this
my
is the map.
vision, which is, it's just sort of sitting on my chest. So I just kind of wanted to explain to people, like,
You put it up on the table. Sure. Brendan can hold it, I can hold it.
Sure.
Brendan, do you want to hold it up?
I
And-
would love
I
to.
mean, it's not particularly detailed. Essentially, we just mapped out.
Let me make a map on top of the map. So this is a triangular building, right? So like here's Kelly Square here, and here's a triangle. Where in this triangle is your store on the ground floor?
Well, it's rounded. Where's Kelly Square?
Right here.
I'm here. I'm by the parking lot by Crompton.
Okay.
So I look at the beautiful mural that's there.
All right. So
And
you're
close to parking, which is always an important feature in
so,
Worcester.
so this is where the
Oh, don't
so
get me started.
This is the Worcester Public Market.
Yep.
Even though this isn't a triangle, I understand. And this is where the Market Pantry is.
Yes.
And then this is the Market Pantry.
Yes. So these are my shelves. This is my big table that's in the middle that Brad made with a grate on top of it that I'm going to hang edible wreaths from. And then this is my shelving where my windows are. So there's cabinetry, and then there's all the shelves up top.
This is like exterior windows. So this
that
is
looks-
like some shelving.
Yep.
This is open to the inside of the market.
Yep. And then I have these mobile, like my cash units on wheels. Everything's on wheels.
And then what is this?
Refrigerators.
My refrigerators. Thank you. I couldn't read
Get it
that.
over
My
here.
refrigerator
okay.
and my freezer.
Okay, so like on three sides there's walls, and then there's one side open to the market.
And then I have 4 mobile retail units that
Okay.
have the same tops as everything else that Brad made.
All right.
So I can move them around and in and out.
You know,
Okay.
one of the things too that strikes me as super important
You
about
can
this
put
as
that- you
well
can-
is, can I put this down?
If you can do whatever you like.
I mean, because there's a housing component to this project as well too, and that's
Yes.
one of the things that seems to be lacking in this neighborhood as well. I know the conversation is always the same downtown as well too. We've been building a ton of housing units, but not necessarily providing the market spaces necessary to support those units without people getting in their car, driving a couple miles to go to a supermarket. I know Lynn from Let Us Be Local is working on a project on the other side of
That's really
Main
exciting.
Street,
That's really
which
exciting.
is great and supports a lot of that neighborhood from a housing perspective. But again, both with the growth of and supporting existing housing units in this neighborhood, this seems to be a key component of that development as well.
Yeah, and I mean, these are people who want to live in a walkable, bikeable area. They want to be able to walk downstairs and grab some food. They want to be able to walk downstairs and grab a beer. They want to be able to walk down the street and go to get barbecue. You know, Alan set this place up beautifully. There's well, I'm really impressed by, like, there's a package drop-off room. There's a bike room where you can just hang your bicycle, go get it. You know, you can. I mean, so it's key carded for everything. So there's a level of that's really interesting. But I'm seeing really, like, young, interesting folks move into the neighborhood. But again, we also have to keep an eye on making sure that this neighborhood still can accommodate the folks that have been living
Yeah.
here for years. We also have to talk about the fact that we can't, gentrify people out of this neighborhood. That's important.
What is what's the view looking like? So we get another year now before baseball's online?
I think so.
And there's obviously going to be some planning in terms of the relationship between these market spaces and the stadium. What does that look like from your perspective?
Well, hopefully people from the ballpark will come hang out and drink beer and
Yeah.
buy stuff at the market, walk around the neighborhood. That's why we don't want the slart parlor there.
Yeah.
I mean, people, we're like, oh, the slots. I'm like, people get off a bus, go into a slot parlor, stay there, get back onto a bus and leave. Like, they don't leave the slot parlor to go
Right.
shopping in the neighborhood. But I think people who are going to be invested in Worcester baseball and are going to be invested in this are definitely going to take into account that there are things happening in the neighborhood that they want to be part of,
Yeah.
not just going to the ball field. So look at people when they go to Fenway. They don't just go to Fenway. They go, they grab a beer, they walk around, they do some other stuff, then they go to their thing, they come back out, do some more. Get on a train, go home. But they're part of the neighborhood. So, I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting summer up here
Sure is.
because they're getting closer and closer. So once that building outside goes down, they're going to be right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when do you plan on coming online down here? I know we just had this past weekend, Jess
Small
Walsh.
Business Saturday, yep. Jess Walsh
came
just
online?
opened in Worcester Wares, so it looks really good down there. She's
So that's in this, that is,
Yep.
Worcester Ware's
Is in the-
store number 2 is in this building?
Yes, it is.
So someone could go in this building?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna go in this building, Mike.
Well, I know we are, but that's because we know you. Like a regular person in the public could also go in this building.
Yeah, and they can
Okay.
go to Jessica's store and shop all things Worcester. So that woman needs a nap, by the way. Between powwow and trying to get a new store ready. So this is Maud, by the way, everyone. Maud's on a podcast. Well, she kept jumping up, so I figured she just wanted to hang out on my lap. So again, I'm doing my best to make the store as accessible to local and attainable local stuff. A lot of Massachusetts stuff.
Fantastic.
What do you have any lessons learned? I'm curious to ask. We talked to a lot of people over the last 12 years on this show about a lot of wonderful projects, and probably 3/4 of these projects have either not happened, blown up, fallen apart, whatever, such is the nature of wonderful projects. And a quarter of them have stuck around and have made a huge impact on the city. You've been making wonderful projects that have lasted or not for a long time in the city of Worcester. Do you have any advice to people who have some sort of vision for doing something in Worcester? Like what kinds of things should people be keeping in mind?
Well, they should keep in mind that this Sunday is start at the station. That's really important. So,
not
just need to throw that out there.
That's not a lesson learned. Please
No,
go
I think a
ahead.
lesson learned is be nice to everyone when you are asking for help. And be nice to them even when they're not particularly nice back and don't understand your vision. Don't burn bridges. Really try to, and this is, so I guess they call me the gentle hammer at start. Because I'll always smile at you when I ask for something, but I'll tap away at you until
Yeah.
you give it to me.
Yeah.
Or you point me in the direction of someone who can get.
In commodities news, Brent crude oil is $61 a barrel, down 5% on the week and down 1% on the year. Bitcoin is $7,300, up 2% on the week and up 80% on the year. And the producer price index for construction sand, gravel, and crushed stone is still crushing it. For October, it was 352.2, up 2% on the month and up 4% on the year. Actually, up 0.2% on the month, but up 0.4% on the year.
Forget about Bitcoin, kids. Keep
I
an
was
eye on
going to
that
say,
sand.
do I need to start buying stock in sand?
No.
Just hoard the sand.
So you were saying before our technical glitch that we just had there that about burning bridges.
Not burning bridges, and so the first start on the street when we moved out of Main South and we moved on to Park Ave, it only went from Pleasant to Elm, and like we all realized immediately it was far too small a space for us because we were just growing by leaps and bounds at that point. And I'll never forget, I ran into Brendan and Iris and Oliver, and he goes, "Yeah, you're never going to believe what the police just said to us as we were crossing the street." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" Because you had said to me, "How's it going?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a little cramped. Like, I think we need a bigger space." And you were like, "Yeah, well, the policeman that just crossed us across the road said that's never going to happen." And I was like, "Wait, they're telling the public that?" And he's like, "Well, yeah." And they were telling each other that I was never going to be able to take more of Park Ave, that this was as far places I could go.
Yeah.
And I went to the chief of police and the mayor and the city manager, and I was like, "Hey, can we talk about like what this means, where your police officers are saying to the public that we're never going to be able to grow in the space that we're in, and one of the reasons that we came to this space so that we could see where we could grow." And it was a nice negotiation, and that's where I ended up with, like, I never had a consistent police contact. I would always have to just reach out to the off-duty office, and it was very
Right.
amorphous.
Right.
And then they'd yell at us when things didn't go right. They were like, why is this here? And we were like, well, no one told us it couldn't be. So we now have a contact at the police, which is Captain Jerry O'Rourke, and we meet regularly to talk about safety and what does that mean. And so once we negotiated that, we were able to take up the rest of Park Ave. So it was that matter of how sort of I went about reaching out to the powers that be to say, well, first of all, please don't announce this to the public during our event. And secondly, how do we make it so that it's bigger? And in a lot of ways, by making it bigger, it was much safer because we spread people out as opposed to congesting them in this really dense area. So, so that's my story. I asked for the meetings with the right people to make things happen in the city.
It's also a testament too about getting people out of their comfort zone as to like this is how you can totally see how in a city where even something as simple as like a road race, like the concept of like leapfrogging details it was a foreign concept, and that's a relatively new thing that you would treat like a 5K the same way you would always treat like a funeral procession, that like you don't have police details at every single intersection. You leapfrog them along so that everything is open and it just took a little bit of learning to get through that and start became such a large presence so quickly. You can totally see in hindsight how it made certain people uncomfortable because it was a new thing, but it also forced people to rethink the way we do things in a way that now we just take it for granted, which is kind of awesome. That like, in a very just in the time frame that like the three of us have been like aware of things happening in the city, some pretty significant changes have taken place to the way events function in the city. And you had no small part in that. And it just, and not in like a, ego thing. I mean, just like realistically, like, no, we want to do this and it could be awesome. And this needs to happen in a very specific sort of way. And the city finally did bend, and it's been awesome as a result.
I mean, and that has led, I think, to things like the Caribbean Festival having less growing pains. I think that, we were the people who sort of started out going, hey, we're going to shut down all these streets in Main South. How does that work? I mean, don't forget, remember back in the day, like we would have to go clean works off the street the day before and like empty bottles and sometimes poop. So, now we're grateful that we don't have to do that, but we love the space that we're in.
I was laughing when you said the Caribbean Festival, because that's probably the best example, because we still have, even though a lot of parades have gone by the wayside over the years, we still have a St. Patrick's Day parade that is very old school in the sense that it starts here and ends here, but we're going to pack people in along the route and shut everything down between. Whereas the Caribbean Festival is this really big thing that might arguably have an even larger turnout or like bigger turnout. I think so,
absolutely, and a more diverse turnout.
But it kind of follows the parade as opposed to like being like structured in a way that the parade is over, but there are still people mulling about at these closed off intersections, roadways, just kind of hanging out in the street, as opposed to like, okay, we've got a destination, so we're going to follow this parade as it moves along, and it ends up arguably being bigger but having less of an impact on infrastructure and the day-to-day of people who don't care that there's a Caribbean parade. They're just trying to get across the city.
I mean, the thing that's really interesting to me, and it's something that the business owners of Park Ave always bring up to me, is like, how is it that the St. Patrick's Day Parade creates so much trash that just gets left in the road? Starting the street happens, you wake up the next day, it's spotless. The only thing that we leave in there is all of our markings on the ground. So it's just
people are way drunker at the St. Patrick's Day Parade.
That is true. They are way drunker. They're not way drunk at my festival.
I mean, how much people were drinking at your festival? I'm sorry to tell you, people were way drunker at the St. Patrick's Day Parade.
That could be why they create more of a mess. But I want people to keep doing things. I want them to try new things. I want them to create events that are just interesting and fun and get people out of their house.
Maybe this is my lesson learned from seeing these things happen, is just that, like, like you have a crazy idea and you put it out there and people say, this idea is crazy. I'm not going to like invest a lot of time and effort in trying to figure out how to make my thing work with this crazy idea. But that if your idea is actually not crazy, you do version 1 of the idea and then you keep doing it, and eventually people are like, oh, actually you're not crazy. And yeah, Tina, you could have a gigantic multi-block, tens of thousands of people art festival in Worcester. Why not?
Why not?
And so we'll work with you to make it happen, because now we realize that you're not some lunatic.
Well, I mean, that's...
Well, I mean, if you're a lunatic who can make it, you can make things happen.
Right, and I have a great team who work really hard and work...
I should say, obviously not...
No, I mean, my team's amazing, and I'm just, so one of our lessons learned, never do an event in the spring. in New England. Nope, never again.
Bad weather,
Always changeable.
wind.
Yep.
Such windy start on the streets.
Oh my God,
oh.
right, so we'll never doing that again. So the last one down here almost broke up the band. And fun fact, my wedding ring is either under the building, my first wedding ring is either under the building or it's in a rock pile somewhere that they took it out of here, because when we were setting up for that last start, instead of tying it to my shoe when I was raking,
Yeah.
I put it in my pocket. And I never found it again.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and because it was an old factory, we came down here with metal detectors.
Oh, and it's just everything.
Yeah. So I always say my wedding ring's either buried underneath that building. And Dino LaRusso, who owns the Crompton building
Sure.
and lives there, would come out every day and look for my wedding ring.
What a sweetheart.
Yeah, oh, what a doll. He's like, it was rose gold. He was like, I figured I could, I could walk around, pick up trash, and look for your ring. So like I said, it's either buried under there or never to be found, or it's in some rock pile, wherever they transported the rock out from. But it feels like, it's a good connection there.
Never have a street festival in the spring.
Never have a street festival in the spring. Oh, no. No
Wouldn't it be
outdoor
great, though,
events.
like when this whole project is wildly successful and everyone forgets about its origin and all the work that went into it, just take for granted that it's there. And someday, 20 years from now, some kid after a giant rain is going to go walking into the desk area, the service area, and hand over a tattered rose gold ring that
That
they
would
found.
be
And
awesome.
hey,
That would be
no, we'll all be
amazing.
long gone.
Yeah,
We don't have any
yeah.
idea where it'll end up.
Well,
but
there's a lot of engraving in that ring, so, if they do find it, it'll be a news story. It'll
Yeah.
definitely be newsworthy. But, so I hope people come down to our new space. I'm hoping to open this Saturday for the holiday stroll. From 9 to 12, because it's at the same time as the farmer's market.
When
But
is
it's a
the date for that?
self-guided holiday stroll. It's the 7th.
Okay.
And then start at the station is the next day.
All right.
So, and you startinthestreet.org, and you guys can, look up our hours and all that.
And that's at the train
That's at
station.
Union Station, yeah.
So people go to the Kelly, people could get into the Kelly Square facility on December 7th and check things out?
I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we get our safety license. But I think we're gonna go down there right now.
Nice.
And so if people were to come down on the 7th, I know, let me just preface this by saying parking is not an issue in the Kelly Square area. There is tons of parking
tons
down
of
here.
parking.
And if you say otherwise, it just means you haven't been down here in a really long time.
And you're old and from Worcester.
That said, if people were to come down on the 7th, what would be the access point coming in to see you?
Harding Street.
Coming in on Harding Street?
Coming in
okay.
on Harding, and you can go down Water and up Harding.
Yep.
Which would be and there's parking right there behind Crompton. There's
So,
street
yeah.
parking on Green. You could
Yep.
park on Green and walk over.
So like if you were to go, if you're picture going towards like going into like say El Patron and just looking left, that
Yep.
would be the entrance.
Yep.
Awesome.
That's the entrance. You'll see bright green shelving.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. Thanks for being on the 508
You guys,
show.
it's good to see you.
Thanks for being here to celebrate Worcester with us, the escalating price of gravel.
The Woo Socks.
The paw socks. I'm never gonna use that word
Renaming the
publicly,
store.
by the way.
Okay.
Next,
Forget it.
for opening day, I think I'm gonna rename the store for a seasoned Pawberry.
Hobby.
Yeah, just
Oh, that would be so
I'm looking for an out on Woo, to be honest with you. I think we've hit peak Woo.
Oh my
in
God,
Worcester,
yeah.
Probably 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I need my out, and I think that's gonna be it.
I think Pawberry's awesome.
Yeah.
I
We'll
would
have to
go.
figure
I
out a
would
way to
eat.
make it dog friendly though, because that would just be a nightmare with all the angry dog owners coming up. What do you mean? Yeah, it's,
Maud would be mad if she couldn't go in.
I don't know, but legally it's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. But still, I think for a day, on opening day, you should totally be Pawberry.
Well, on that note, that's all for this episode.
Thank goodness.
We'll see you next time. And remember, Worcester, you can bench more than you think you can.